Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us here tonight. I'm Angela. I'm the Education and Training Manager at Coram PACEY, and I'm joined by Wendy Ratcliff and Sam Sleeman-Boss from Ofsted, who are here tonight to answer your questions about Ofsted's renewed inspection framework. Thank you so much for joining us, Wendy and Sam. It's great to have you here. Before we get stuck into questions, I'm just going to do a really quick housekeeping. So the webinar is being recorded this evening, and that will be made available to watch back. We will also publish answers to the most frequently asked questions on our resource page. I'm going to post the link to that in the chat. Can't talk and do posting at the same time. There we go, that's in the chat. We have had lots of questions this evening, some along common themes which I've grouped, some a bit more specific. We'll try to get through as many as we can. If we run out of time, we'll make sure we get answers and get them published too for you. So the chat facility is open this evening. If you've got any questions about what we're talking about as we're talking about them, as discussed, please drop them in the chat and I'll do my best to get to them. A final point from me before we just get started is we are aware of recent cyber attacks on online virtual events such as webinars like this. We have measures in place to reduce those risks, but should we be subject to a breach, I will immediately end the webinar for all and we'll follow up with you by email as soon as we can. That might not be immediate, so just please bear with us and thank you. So before we start with questions, I'm just going to drop in the chat also the link to Ofsted's inspection toolkit operating guide and information, just so you can have that up and if you wanted to reference it as we go through. Okay then, welcome Sam, Wendy, thank you so much again, and let's get straight to the questions and answers. So our most frequently asked question has been about the planning call. We've had lots of concerns around this happening while childminders are caring for the children, and this not only being challenging for childminders, but not equitable to other provisions where they have space, time and a bit more focus to concentrate. And childminders have questioned why this can't be arranged outside of childminders' working hours. Suggestions have been in the evening after children have gone home. I thought maybe you could give some context to the planning call and address some of those concerns.
Okay, so shall I make a start, Sam, and then you can fill in any gaps, anything I miss. So I think firstly, what we'd like to say is please don't worry about this. You know, inspectors are expected to understand the context that you're working in and be flexible around you. But having said that, we cannot expect our inspectors to work evenings, and neither would we want to put pressure on you to work in your evenings just for us. So we've been notifying childminders of their inspections for many years now, and these calls have often taken up a fair amount of time to get all the information inspectors have needed. So the planning call is there for inspectors to understand your settings context, what you see as your setting strengths, your priorities for improvement, understand what you want all children to know and be able to do at your setting, and your approach to inclusion. So it's a really good opportunity and chance for you to meet the inspector before the inspection and be involved in determining those areas of inspection focus. So we will notify you in a notification call before 10 o'clock, and we hope this gives us both an opportunity to agree when might be the best time for the planning call. If it is impossible to have a separate call, so inspectors can understand your context you're working in, please don't worry about that either. They will likely ask you some of what they need during that notification call and discuss the rest on the day of inspection. But if inspectors choose to work in the evenings and you would like to be called in the evening, you will be able to agree this with the inspector. However, as we said, there's no expectation from our perspective that inspectors work in the evenings. And again, we don't expect you to either. Sam, have I missed anything?
No, I think you've got that covered, Wendy.
How long can the childminders expect that planning call to take?
So
It'll be around
that is a good one.
30 minutes.
Yeah, 30 minutes. That's what we're aiming for.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant.
I think some notification calls now take around, or under the previous framework, took around 30, 45 minutes. So it'll be a similar amount of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think
And
the key difference, sorry, I think the key difference, Sam, though, is the fact that, we're called childminders, won't we, to say, hi, we're calling you to let you know your inspection's going to take place. Let's arrange a time to have a more detailed call. So it can be that flexible. It might be, if children are having a nap after lunch or something.
Yeah. So that is that time is agreed upon, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Between yourselves. Yeah.
And
I think
under the previous framework, we called it lunchtime, didn't we, to notify only one of the busiest times for a childminder in the day. So we're hoping that by calling before 10 a.m. and then agreeing that call later on, it helps.
And does that planning call happen? So the notification call happens, but does the planning call happen on the same day as the notification call? So it's later that day, or is it another day?
We do aim to do it the same day.
Okay.
But because now we are notifying and childminders the day that we are going to inspect, because what we'll do in the planning call is to try and identify what is the best day for us to see what's typical for particularly disadvantaged children at the childminder setting. It could be possible that we call another day if we weren't going to be inspecting the following day.
Okay.
As long as it happens before the inspection, isn't it, Wendy?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And someone just asked if children are present, can the inspector work around being broken off due to meeting the needs of the children in the care? Is that acceptable for you guys?
Children's needs come first.
Of course. Super. Okay. Someone's just asked what happens if we miss the call in the morning. A lot of people have actually said they don't answer the phone in the day because they're with the children. So how would that work in that scenario?
Do you want me to answer, Wendy?
Yeah, please. You can go.
So the inspector will leave you a message and
try again.
They will try again. There is a limit to how often we can try. So please do try and answer especially if we have left a message, because once we've tried so many times, it might be that we need to come out without notice, and we would rather not do that.
Lovely, thank you. Similarly to the concerns about the planning call taking place while children are present, childminders, especially those working alone, are asking if there's any alternative to being asked about safeguarding in front of children. There's questions that might be sensitive or not appropriate so that the care of the children isn't compromised. Perhaps you can talk through the safeguarding evaluation area and how you expect that to be evidenced and discussed during the inspection.
Sam, I'll leave you to
I was going to say,
do
you want to take it, or do you want me to take it?
I was going to give it to you.
Okay, so I think firstly to say that inspectors do understand that childminders often work alone, and that their priority obviously needs to be the children in the care at the setting. Also to say that any discussions about safeguarding shouldn't be so sensitive that they can't be discussed with children around. And if sensitive discussions are needed, so for example, if there are specific concerns that inspectors are following up on, then inspectors will let you know about that so that you can agree when it is going to be best for those discussions to happen. So, if there are going to be nap times, for example, during the day, then that would be a good time for you to have those discussions. And the reason that the evaluation of safeguarding must take place at the inspection rather than before we arrive or afterwards is because it is set in legislation. So inspectors are not legally able to gather evidence to evaluate the quality of provision before they arrive at the setting. The inspection starts when the inspector arrives at the setting. But, as we've said, and I hope this is childminders' experiences under the previous framework as well, that we will work flexibly around you to gather that evidence that we need to arrive at the grades. And obviously we want to know what it's typically like at your setting, and that might mean that we might need to be with you longer than the 3 hours that we tried to be there if it is difficult to have those discussions with you. But the planning call will allow you and the inspectors to discuss that and make plans.
I think the key one hearing so far is the flexibility of the approach to working with childminders and understanding how childminders operate and some of the challenges that they have. Okay.
And that's what the planning call is really brilliant for, because we can have those discussions and find out what your typical day is like, and see when is going to be best to have those discussions, and what day is best to come and inspect, depending on the children at your setting. So the planning call is really vital.
Okay. So there's clear focus in the inspection toolkit on the identification and support for disadvantaged children. That's socioeconomically disadvantaged, those with SEND, those known or previously known to social care, or those who may face other barriers to their learning and well-being. We've had concerns that if there are no children on roll that are identified as disadvantaged at the time of inspection, that this will limit the childminder's grade or disadvantage the childminder in some way. And we can see from the operating guide that inspectors will consider how well staff are supported and trained to be able to accurately identify those children's needs and help them should they be on roll in the future. But what does that really look like, and how can that be evidenced during an inspection?
That's a really, really great area to focus on, actually, because inclusion is something that will be a focus of all inspections, and it is something that, our chief inspector has spoken about, and that important message that if we get it right for those children, then we get it right for all children. So on inspection, our focus is on those children who you have just described, who need our support the most to be ready for their next stage in education, including school when that arrives. That time comes. So inspectors will case sample a range of children, which will include those with SEND, those who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, as well as children known to children's social care, but also other children who may face barriers to their learning or well-being. So when we're evaluating inclusion, we'll consider how well you and any assistants are supported and trained to be able to accurately identify these children's needs and to help them. Should there be any on roll in the future, for example, and we do this through discussion. And it may be that you're able to talk about children in these groups who are no longer on roll, or you might have children who have other barriers, maybe because of protected characteristics, for example, or personal circumstances that their families are facing at that particular time as well, because, that is about those with facing barriers, really. But inspectors will also be curious as to why you haven't got any children attending, particularly if you've never had any of these children on roll. How do you make sure your setting's inclusive to these children? And how do you work with the local authority to ensure children from these groups in your local community have access to provision, particularly if there are high numbers of children eligible for EYPP, early years pupil premium, for example, or SEND in your local community? It's a kind of like that will help us with those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. What about children who are achieving above and beyond their the developmental expectations? With those children, the approach will be different for them to meet their wants and their needs. Will they be included in that case sampling? Could they be included in that case sampling?
So I think, Sam, I don't know if you want to come in here, but essentially, when we think about, as I say, what our chief inspector has said, we will case sample children, and we will talk about the best children to case sample. But our focus on the renewed inspection is those children who need our support the most to be ready for their next stage in education. If we get it right for those children, we
Yeah.
get it right for all children. But of course, you do need to be meeting the needs of all children in your care.
Yeah.
Yes, Wendy.
And I think you've already addressed this, but can I ask you explicitly? You said, I think you said that you could discuss children who have been in your care who are not currently on roll and how you met their needs if they met that disadvantaged criteria. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So it may be that, in those discussions, it may be that actually you haven't got children with particular needs at this moment in time, but
Mm.
you're able to reflect on maybe somebody who's just left who had speech and language delay, for example. And actually, what was it that you did to support that child in order to be ready for what came
Yeah.
next?
And just thinking about that in that scenario, how would you evidence that? Is that just through the conversation, or would you expect to see anything?
No, we wouldn't. No. I think one thing that we need to be really clear about is when we're talking about case sampling, we're not talking about case studies. So
No.
we don't need um, childminders to be preparing anything. It's just about having those conversations.
Okay.
We do it through discussion, and the reason why we can trust this is because when we're observing this high quality education and care and having those discussions about the childminder's knowledge and any assistance knowledge, then we'll be able to trust that they'll be able to meet those children's needs should they attend.
Yeah. Where the setting is small, say, and only has 3 children attending, well, how many case sample? I think that's the question. How many case samplings are you expecting? And if there's only 3 children to choose from, how does that work?
Well, if I'm the inspector and it's me, I'm just observing the 3 children.
Yeah. Anything else on that?
I don't think so. I think, it's such a small setting, isn't it? That when you're doing your observations, the childminder is going to be interacting with all of those children, potentially at the same time. So you're case sampling all of the children, really. You're going to have discussions about all of them.
Yeah. Okay. Where possible, inspectors will want to speak to parents who are part of that case sampling. Can you tell us how and when this will happen and what detail you'll want to be, the inspectors will be asking them?
Shall I take this, Wendy?
Yeah, you go for that one, Sam.
Yeah, so this is part of our case sampling, as you just said, Angela, and we will definitely want to talk to parents of disadvantaged children, those with SEND, and those who are known to children's social care or have other barriers to their learning and or well-being. So we'll want to know how well parents feel they and their child are included at the setting. We'll want to know how well they're supported to take up their full entitlement to early education. What support do they receive to continue their children's learning at home? And what we'll do is that during the planning call, we'll discuss this with childminders about how we can talk to parents. And that might be as children are dropped off in the morning or picked up in the evening, or by telephone if parents agree to do that.
Someone's just asked, most children will arrive at the setting before the inspection happens. So how will you contact those parents? And what if it's by telephone, when would that happen?
Well, that's what we'll discuss in the planning call. So we'll discuss the children and the parents that we want to track the experiences of and case sample, and the childminder will be able to let us know when it's going to be best to speak with those parents, and we can arrange that then. I was on a pilot inspection last week at a preschool setting, and a parent of a disadvantaged child wasn't able to speak with me, but they did arrange for me to speak to them by phone. So that was really good. And we're used to talking to parents on the phone for childminder inspections.
Yeah. And I guess you won't be saying to them you're part of case sampling.
Oh no.
Sam, I think I've just lost you either.
I am here.
Oh, you froze momentarily there. Mid-sentence, I think. Sorry, could you repeat that?
No, I mean, we don't use that language with parents. We're finding out what it's like for their child to be at the setting. Yeah.
And is it only parents of those identified as disadvantaged you'd want to speak to? What about the other parents in the setting?
Well, because we are focusing on those children throughout all of our inspections, they are the parents that we want to speak to. But of course, we will speak to other parents. We might not be able to speak to those parents. That's absolutely fine. Yeah, but there is a limit to our time on inspection. So we do need to, carefully choose who it is that we speak to, and really focus our attention on what our inspections are all about, which is on safeguarding, inclusion, and leadership.
Okay, great, thank you. The focus on childminders' wellbeing is clear through the operating guide, with emphasis on checking with leaders on their wellbeing and the wellbeing of any other staff on before inspection activities begin and throughout the day of inspection. What will that look and feel like on the day? I guess starting with the planning call, the concept of a video call can be anxiety inducing for some. how will that be taken into consideration? And then what reasonable adjustments are available for childminders and their staff and assistants throughout the inspection, for those who might be neurodivergent, anxious, nervous, or those who just find it really difficult to verbalise their knowledge under pressure. What sort of accommodations will be made?
It's good to know that you can see that well-being of childminders comes through that operating guide, because that's really important to us. And our inspectors will work flexibly around you as childminders. So, for example, if you would prefer to have the planning call by phone rather than video, let the inspector know this during the notification call. Um, and in terms of reasonable adjustments, inspectors will ask how you usually manage your individual needs, if that makes sense. Inspectors must contact our duty desk when any reasonable adjustments are needed to ensure that we're meeting our legal obligations there. Um, so inspectors understand that you and your assistants might feel nervous. They give you plenty of opportunity to demonstrate what you know and your typical practice, thinking about typicality of what it's like to be a child. And if there is something you feel you wanted to tell us, and you can let us know. Inspection, again, let's remind ourselves, it's not a memory test. And we have found that the video planning call, where technology has allowed, has been really helpful in reducing anxiety, because leaders have got to know the inspector before they arrive. So actually, that's that first opportunity to have that professional dialogue. And don't forget, we'll also be telling you which day we're coming. So this should also help reduce those nerves too.
Yeah. Follow-up question to that. I'm just thinking, when I get nervous and I forget something, I might then remember it an hour or two later. Can you come back to it in the inspection and think, oh, I remember that now, I'm settling into it? Can you go back to a question you might not have given a full answer to?
We would encourage you to do so. Yeah. If you think, oh, I should have said that, then let us know.
Absolutely bring it up again, and it won't.
Yeah. And likewise, it might be, we talk about, it's not, inspection's not a memory test, and it might be that actually you have something jotted down because that's the way you work. If you wanted to refer to whatever it is you've got jotted down, then that's absolutely fine. But it's just that we don't expect any paperwork beyond EYFS requirements.
I think for a lot of people, certainly for me, my memory, especially at this point in my life, I need to write things down or I'm not going to remember them. So I think that's helpful, isn't it, as well, to be able to know that you don't expect it, but you can use those notes if that's what works for you. That's really helpful.
And if the inspector uses any language or terminology that you don't understand, or asks a question that you don't understand, or the question's too long, and by the time they've got to the end of it, you've forgotten what the first bit of it, ask them to repeat it, ask them to break it down, ask them what they mean. We would absolutely expect you to do that, and we would expect our inspectors to be using language that is accessible and that you would understand. So don't be afraid to ask what we mean.
Yeah, that's really important, isn't it? We don't expect anybody out there to speak our language. If we're not being clear, then we need to make sure that we are clear in what we're asking.
Okay. I'm going to move on to thinking about if you can provide some clarity on inspection cycles. So the rollout of the 4-year inspection cycles, how will providers know when to expect their next inspection? Gosh, that's a mouthful, isn't it? If they were last inspected in 2022, for example, when could they inspect an inspection?
I'm leaving this one to Wendy.
Oh, were you? I was going to say, I was going to leave. No.
Sorry, it was a bit of a tongue twister.
No, this is a really...
well, so.
This is a question we're being asked a lot. It's a very popular question at the moment, and one that we will do our best to answer now. But what we can say is that, let's think about this for a moment. So you told us, childminders, that inspecting every 6 years is too long to wait for your inspection. That causes more anxiety, nervousness, because there's such a long gap between inspections. So we've been working with the DfE on this, and the DfE have now commissioned us to reduce this to every 4 years. And for newly registered settings, the first inspection will be coming out sooner. It won't be the 30 months that it is currently. However, at the moment, you can imagine that those changes come into effect from April next year. That's when the funding becomes available for us. But I'm sure, as you can imagine, there's a lot of providers out there, and we are needing to work out timescales and things when we can be moving towards that 4-year window, and what that means if you were last inspected in 2022, for example. So at the moment, we're not able to say just yet what the timescales will be for settings once we move to the new inspection window. Once we have that detail, we are committed to, and we will publish the information so you will know when to expect your inspection. But for now, until we get to April, we're still at 6 years, and we will look to move to 4 from April. I hope that's not, can't really say more than that at the moment.
Okay. I'm just going to go back to the chat. There have been lots of questions as we've been talking. I'm going to try and pick out some. Not ignoring the chat. I know that there are questions coming in. We just have a lot to get through tonight, so I'm trying to just pick things that are appropriate. So, question about if a childminder doesn't have any disadvantaged children on roll, are they able to get exceptional if they're mainly focusing on children with additional needs and they don't have any? Are they still able to obtain the higher gradings?
Yes. Don't need to say any more than that. The answer is yes, but let's not start any myths out there.
Yeah, okay. And people saying majority of children in the area I live in are not disadvantaged and don't have SEND. Therefore, is that going to affect the grading of the inspection as well?
But we'll know that because we'll be looking at data before we come out. You'll be able to tell us the context of the area in which you work in. How do you know that there are not high numbers of children with SEND in your local community? Because if you know that, then clearly you're working with the local authority to know that information and keep abreast of what's happening in your area. So that's a great sign, isn't it? And don't forget that when we're talking about those children, disadvantaged children, socioeconomically disadvantaged children, just because you live in an affluent area doesn't mean that children are not going to have engagement with children's social care, for example, and other barriers, as Wendy just said. I mean, when we're talking about barriers, if you want us to give you some examples, I mean, we've mentioned protected characteristics already, but it could be absolutely anything that could be a barrier to children's learning and or well-being. Maybe they suffer from glue ear, or do you know what I mean? Or it's that time of year when they have got illnesses, or they've recently been in hospital, or somebody in their family's been in hospital, or there's a new baby, or they're moving home, or there's been a relationship breakup. All of those things can be barriers to children's learning and or well-being, and I know from experience that childminders can tell us those things.
Yeah, definitely. And some of those things might be a short-term barrier to learning because of a new baby, a new sibling, and it might be that you're doing something differently to support that child and that family during that time. So there's lots of scenarios.
Childminders being able to tell you about the children in their care and the circumstances and how they're meeting their needs.
Spot on. I just thought, Wendy, as well, they could be a young carer, couldn't they? But this is absolutely about how well childminders know their children and families.
Yeah. Okay. Another question about if children go to nursery as well as a setting, how does that affect a planning call or an inspection?
Well, it's about knowing your children and actually what is it that you're doing to meet that child's needs, and that complements what is happening elsewhere.
Yeah, and working together with that setting.
Yeah,
a partnership working. Okay, I'm just trying to get through as many of these in the chat as possible. If you're if you don't have any children who can be identified as disadvantaged on roll, and you're referring to children who've left your setting, would you want to speak to parents of those children? Would they be part of that case sampling? No.
Not unless, if the childminder wanted us to, and that still had a
Yeah.
relationship with that child's parents and wanted us to speak to them, then absolutely, I personally would speak to them if the childminder asked me to. But
Yeah.
um,
I mean, not if it was
we
5
don't
years ago, but
know,
yeah.
and we don't want childminders to go out of their way to
No.
make contact with them.
Okay. Okay. Let's just check again. Someone's asking, is the Ofsted page for us to access our LAD data live yet?
Good question.
That is a really good question.
Shall I say, Wendy?
Yeah, I'll let you say.
There's going to be a blog out tomorrow, I believe,
Amazing.
on the data tool that inspectors will be using to get the data that they need to understand the context of your setting. And you will be able to access that tool as well. It's called Ofsted Explore an Area. Parents will also be able to use this tool to find out information about childcare. Is it sufficiency, Wendy, or and different
Yeah.
settings? So that's where they'll be able to look at different settings in the local area. It's a really great tool, and we hope that you find it of any benefit for yourselves.
Okay. Okay. I'm conscious of time. We've got a lot more to get through tonight, so I'm going to carry on with questions that we have been asked prior to the webinar. But do still keep them coming in the chat, and I will try to get to them. And if we can't answer them here tonight, we'll get answers for them. Will we be sending a link to this and the blog? Yes. So I'll come to that at the end. But yes, we will be sharing the blog as well when it's shared for Ofsted. I've made a note of that to do that tomorrow when that comes out. Great. Okay. It would be really useful to hear about the new gradings versus the old. Do the old good and outstanding translate to expected strong and exceptional? What does the correlation there look like?
I'll let you go for that one, Sam.
Well, thanks. The old judgments don't translate to the new grades in any way. This is a total reset, and all settings should be meeting the expected standards, because our standards are so closely aligned with the statutory EYFS requirements that if you're not meeting expected standards, you're not meeting the requirements of the EYFS. So you either need attention or urgent improvement. And when we look at the standards, the expected standards in each of the evaluation areas, and I hope people have had opportunity to have a look at the early years toolkit, because it is there for you as well as for inspectors. I'm really hoping that you can see that they are firstly closely aligned, but when you look at the detail of it, you'll see that it's a high standard. It's a high standard. If you think about the requirements of the EYFS talks about high quality education and care. So if you are meeting expected standards, then you're absolutely doing what is right for children and what's required by the EYFS.
Yeah. I think that's really important, isn't it? Is to kind of, we've based the toolkit on the requirements of the EYFS, and the EYFS, the DfE's EYFS talks about high quality care and education, and expected standard is about that. And if you're doing, if you're meeting expected standard, you're doing what's right for your children.
Okay, thank you. With the previous inspections, Ofsted's had grading logos to help promote childminders services, the good and the outstanding provider logos. How do you see childminders being able to promote themselves, given that the new report card doesn't have an overall grade?
I think that's a really good question, and another one that we get asked a lot. And actually, it will be up to childminders to about how they choose to use the evaluation of their own setting to promote that. So yeah, the logos are no more, obviously, because we're not funneling everything up into that one word judgment, as it were. But what you can do is, if you can use those logos until you get your next inspection, and then when you get your inspection, it's thinking about how you choose to use the evaluation of your setting to promote it.
The onus is then on the provider.
Yeah.
Me and Wendy started our careers so Wendy started her career as a home childcarer nanny, and I started my early years career as a childminder. And we both know how creative these people are, and we expect to see some creative ways that people would be promoting themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, a specific question here. So childminders must have regard for the new EYFS nutrition guidance. What are Ofsted looking for to evidence this in inspection standards, and have inspectors received additional training to support monitoring of food provision by childminders?
Sam, do you want to get that one?
Okay, well, firstly, I want to say that we don't go through the requirements of the EYFS and check that every single EYFS requirement is being met. So we wouldn't use it as a checklist ever. But yes, there have been these changes to nutrition. And as you'll see from our toolkit, which I've got here in front of me, I don't go anywhere without it anymore. In children's welfare and well-being, we talk about children being provided with a healthy diet. And so it is something that we will look at on inspection. And it will be up to childminders to let us know how they do that. And we'll observe it in practice, won't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there has been some strange myths out there that might be good to just kind of like put straight. Things like we can't, things around picnics and things. That's come through, hasn't it, a couple of times, Sam?
Yeah.
And we're very, we're not saying you can't go on a picnic anymore, or things around. We're not the lunchbox police either. So just thinking about how you're providing children with those good habits for the future and healthy and nutritious balanced diet.
Lovely, thank you. Okay. Someone just said that's what they do with food, always sit down with parents and helping them make good choices about food, etc. Those are the things you'd be wanting to see, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Someone just asked the question there. My parents then pack lunches. I've requested certain items from parents, but they don't always conform to that. Will the childminder be marked down for that, essentially, if lunchboxes sent in by parents aren't necessarily meeting those nutritional guidance?
No, but we'll want to know what childminders have done with parents in terms of supporting them. Yeah, to encourage them, and obviously we'll be talking to parents. So we connect our evidence. We don't base our evaluations on one single piece of information. We connect it throughout our inspection. So when we're having those conversations with children, we're having conversations with parents, any assistance, then we'll be joining all the dots.
Lovely. Okay. And one of the biggest concerns we've always had about inspections is consistency. What measures are being put in place now to ensure consistency across the board, and how can childminders be reassured about that quality and consistency amongst inspectors?
Yeah, that is something that does come up for us a lot, and also is something from the big listen when we did that last year, in terms of one of our 7 C's is around consistency, and how we get consistency in our approach, and how we use our operating guide and our methodology, for example. But let's just remind ourselves that every inspection will be unique, because every setting is unique. No two places are the same. So what we have to do is we have to adapt to each setting's context. However, what will be consistent is our approach to inspection and how we grade each setting. So our inspections are based on, as we've said, the statutory requirements of the early years foundation stage. Our toolkit makes it clear what inspectors will expect to see and how they will evaluate the extent to which these things are happening in practice. And as part of our renewed framework, our inspectors have had extensive training, and they have undergone quality assurance processes before they've been determined as confident and competent to carry out our inspections under the framework. All of the reports will be going through quality assurance to begin with, so that we're assured that inspectors are grading settings fairly and proportionately. And if any leader experiences something, and when we say leaders, we mean you as childminders, because you are the leaders of your settings, experience something other than what we have communicated, you should be expecting, then please raise it with the inspector in the first instance. And if you still continue to have concerns, then you've got the provider contact helpline that you can use, and that's the number the inspector will give you during the notification or the planning call, and that's that opportunity where you can speak to a senior manager. And then again, remember, we've also got the complaints process that you can use at the point after inspection before your report is published.
Can I just ask if the reports are going through QA initially at the moment, is that going to mean that the provider won't get their report at the same sort of time as they would other than that? Did that make any sense? Is there a delay in them receiving their final report, I think is what I'm asking, because it's going through additional processes?
The draft report will come within the usual timescales, but we will initially be looking to publish reports in a batch in the first instance.
Okay.
Just because because it's that's helpful to do, I think, as well. So that because there'll be lots of interest in there as from media and everything. So we won't just publish one and then everybody's all over that one report. We do it when we've got a number to go.
Okay.
Yeah, but then once we get into our usual routine, actually nothing has changed from the previous framework in terms of timescales for reporting.
Yeah. Okay. A bit of a sort of follow up on about consistency is there any auditing of exceptional needs attention and requires improvement gradings being issued? So that's a question, first of all. Is there auditing of that, and is there internal monitoring of those grades, and how does Ofsted intend to safeguard against potential bias then?
Yeah, there is, and as I'm sure you will appreciate, we're monitoring inspection grades carefully as we embark on this renewed inspection framework and the renewed methodology. And we've been very clear that exceptional grade will be rare. Exceptional grades will be given where there is that practice having a truly transformational impact on children, and where the sharing of such practice would benefit others. And not only that, but all the grading standards for expected standard, strong standard, and exceptional must be met. And remembering that exceptional does not equate to outstanding. Inspectors will have to contact the duty desks whenever they believe a setting is exceptional in any evaluation area, and they will need to discuss the evidence that they have to demonstrate all standards are met for that particular evaluation area and the impact that the specific exceptional practice has on children, and whether this has been sustained over time. I think, Sam, for us, in terms of you've got your toolkit there, and one of the things, there are it's that 5 grading scale now, and it's the 3 in the middle that we expect to see most often, with urgent improvement and exceptional being the ones that we will see less often. More often, we're going to have a range of grades across the evaluation areas. Sam, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's fine, Wendy. Just reiterating really the expected standard is a high standard. It's high quality education and care.
And I think this renewed framework as well gives us this really great opportunity, doesn't it, to celebrate what childminders are doing well, validate your what you're working on, your priorities for improvement, and then actually highlight anything in an evaluation area that you might be, yeah, something to do next.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to follow that up, someone said they had an inspection today. The inspector
Oh,
had another inspector with her to assess for quality assurance. She's asking, should she have that in place already? Why did she get to come today, I think is the question.
Because we are in the process of doing what we're calling a steady and assured start. And yes, that we need to make sure all our inspectors have the confidence following their training to carry out the inspections under the renew framework. So that's good
yeah.
to hear.
Yeah. Every single inspector is having that on their first inspection,
Yes,
at least.
First live inspection, I suppose. Live inspections are different from training, aren't they? So
yes.
and scenario based work and pilots and all the other things that are happening. What percentage are you expecting to get the highest standard? What do you have a thought about that?
Bit difficult to say really, because yeah.
But if you think of it as a bell curve, because I think this is how these 5-point scales work, you know, like that expected standard is at the top. So that's, as Wendy said, we expect
The
to see
starting point.
yeah, exactly. Most settings will be in that expected standard. Then as we go down, it will be needs attention, and on the other side, strong standard. And then at the bottom on the left, you'd have urgent improvement, and on the bottom on the right, you'd have exceptional. So that's kind of the way that the 5-point scale works.
Yeah, that's really useful to think about, that bell curve way of thinking about it like that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we know that you've been conducting pilot inspections, and that whilst we're still early days, are you able to give an insight on how pilots have gone? For example, how many childminders have had pilot inspections? Will there be a report or analysis? And I guess what the outcomes of that will be to influence any future inspections or changes or improvements.
I didn't know you were going to give us a numbers question, but I do know that we have had childminders, including co-childminders, actually take part in the pilot inspections. I don't know if you want to say.
And we've had some great experiences, haven't we? I know both you and I have been out on inspections, and I went out on a pilot inspection with a childminder, and I have to say it was a really fantastic opportunity, and we're really grateful for those volunteers that we've had. But we have had, I haven't got the number to hand, to be honest, but we have had a number of childminders, and as Sam says, co-childminders take part in the pilot inspections. But as you can imagine, we haven't had as many offers from childminders to take part as we have from group settings, shall we say. But we are confident that the renewed framework and the methodology works for childminders. We have tested it, and that's because we're not looking at anything we were not already looking at before, if that makes sense. And we have always worked collaboratively with childminders throughout the inspection, and we've brought this model into other early years settings. That's something that we discovered quite early on when we were doing some very early testing visits, and this approach of working collaboratively and having reflective discussions, and actually found that, you know, what we do with childminder inspection, we probably need to take some of that learning and do more of that when we're inspecting group settings.
Someone's asking how inspections will work for childminders on the compulsory part of the childcare register, and on the voluntary, how if they haven't got early years children, if they've got if they're wraparound providers, for example, how will inspections work for them?
Okay, so I'll make a start there, and then Sam, I'll let you fill in the gaps, the bits I miss. So if I do the bit about, if you're only registered on the um, general childcare register, compulsory and voluntary parts, and you're not on the early years register, then those inspections haven't changed. So they will be that kind of like, we come along and we do a compliance approach to inspection, and you get you met or not met in terms of that. However, if you're on the early years
I'll do this
register,
bit.
oh,
I'll
go
do
on then,
this
you
one
do that bit.
because
Sorry,
this is the exciting bit.
go on then, you do the exciting bit.
So
I'll let
if
you.
you are on the early years register and you only provide care for children before and after school
Thought you said
or
you
in the
wanted to
school
do that bit.
holidays, I know, now I've lost it, then what is very exciting is that you will no longer have a met or not met grade. You will be graded on the 5-point scale. And as well as that, because you don't have to meet the learning and development requirements of the EYFS, we will not be evaluating curriculum and teaching and achievement. Is that right,
And
Wendy?
that is correct. And that's because you don't have to meet the requirements of the learning and development requirements of the EYFS.
Okay. And that's really good for those providers who provide wraparound care, get a much more holistic picture on a report of their setting, isn't it, than whether met or not met. So I think that sounds really positive, doesn't it? We have questions in the chat about ratios. I don't know if that's
dreaded ratios. Come on,
dreaded ratios.
Go for it. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, but yes.
Yes, I think that's the answer. Yes. Yeah. Can you confirm numbers? 6 under 8 and 3. Well, 6 under 8 and 3 under 5.
Oh God! What does it say in the EYFS?
What does the EYFS say? So yeah, I know. EYFS. Yeah, the ratios in the EYFS aren't they? They are 6 under 8, of which 3 can be under 5. But you can make exceptions to the usual ratios in certain circumstances, as long as you continue to meet the needs of the children in your care. And
just because you can doesn't mean
you should. But if you have more, because you can't have more than 6 if you're working on your own. 6 is the limit. But actually, how you can be flexible within that and have more children under 5 if you are able to provide that high quality care and education, and
meet those children's
needs. And what's right for one child might not be right for another child. So you know your children, you know what you provide in your setting, and whether or not that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing what's right for your children, then you're doing what's right for Ofsted.
Yeah, of course. Someone's asked what circumstances those flexibilities can be applied. I always give an example of providing continuity of care for if a family has another baby and they want them to stay with you as their childcare provider. And if a parent comes to you with twins, you can't say you're going to take one and not the other. So those are sort of some of the examples. Would you give any others?
Exactly. Well, I think what the and of course, when we're talking about ratios, the ratios are set out in the DfE's EYFS, and there are some examples within that section, those safeguarding and welfare requirements. And what the DfE say is that list isn't exhaustive.
And it's about being able to meet the needs of the children in your care, and being able to evidence that should you be asked to. Someone's saying some childminders just take extra children, is that allowed? Well, no, but in circumstances it can be.
You can be flexible.
Okay. We are rapidly running out of time. I just want to ask you if you can give an overview to the complaints procedure. You touched on it earlier, Wendy. How are complaints reviewed? Is there an independent panel? Can an inspector dismiss a complaint without full investigation? I think many childminders feel vulnerable when challenging an outcome, especially when they're working alone. Greater transparency around that would provide reassurance. Can you comment on that?
We certainly can. Sam, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I do, because I think it's a really great question. And, we would, as Wendy's already said, if your experience is not what you were expecting and not what that we've communicated, then raise your concerns with the inspector, call the provider contact helpline and speak to a senior manager if you need to, complain after the inspection, if you'd like to. It helps us to know if you haven't had the experience that we think that you should be getting, because if we don't know about it, we can't do anything about it. Actually, you could have answered this question yourself, Angela, because I know that you've been part of our complaints panels.
Is it coming from you?
Yeah. To look at a couple of recent complaints that we've investigated and their outcome. We anonymise them, don't we? And
Yes.
we do usually include complaints from childminders, and the panel see everything from the complaint to what the investigating officer did and how we arrived at the findings. And no, to answer your question about whether we dismiss complaints, we investigate every single complaint that we receive about Ofsted, and in fact, many aspects of complaints are upheld, as you found out at the panel. So I don't know if you want to add anything to this yourself, Angela, about your experience.
Yeah, I was impressed with the length of scrutiny that is involved and the steps in the process. And I think we spoke about it at the panel. It would be great to see some data around that. And we're obviously not going to share specifics, but data around that would help. I think would help reassure childminders that they are listened to, and their complaints are noted. I think one of the most impressive parts of it was where there's learning to be had from a complaint being upheld, that is shared cross-departmentally with others, with the other departments, and with other remits, so that learning goes above and beyond just that inspector who that complaint might be about. It goes to the wider teams, and that was what was really stood out as being really impressive to me.
And we take the learning from them. So if there's learning for individual inspectors, that's shared with them. If there's learning for policy teams like ours, we'll take that back and we'll consider what it means for policy. But I'd say don't be afraid to complain. It cannot go against you. In fact, inspectors who come out to you again can't see that any complaint that you made about another inspector. And remember, you know, I know some childminders are afraid that they might get the same inspector again. Actually, if an inspector calls you and you previously complained about them and you don't think it would be appropriate for that inspector to come again, then you can use the provider contact helpline. Well, you can first of all tell the inspector that you don't think it would be appropriate for them to do your inspection. And if they insist on doing the inspection, you can speak to a senior manager by using the provider contact helpline. But remember, providers, leaders, they complain for many different reasons, and it's not always about the individual inspector. So sometimes it might absolutely be appropriate for an inspector to go to the setting again, depending on what the complaint was. So we can never say they would never go back to the same setting. I mean, we've got inspectors who have worked for us for a lot of years, Wendy being one of them. And if we said, Wendy could never go to the same setting more than once, then, we're narrowing down the amount of inspections that she can do. So
there are some questions in the chat about childminders, complaints about childminders to Ofsted, and how that is dealt with. I don't think we have time to answer those things tonight. I think that is another broader webinar, perhaps, or
is
another
childminders complaining about other childminders,
or childminders being complained about by parents, or malicious complaints, things like that, things that are done. And I don't think we're at 8 o'clock now, so we definitely don't have time to go into that tonight, but that is something we can pick up and do some more resource and information sharing about. I just want to say thank you so much. It's been a really full evening tonight, and thank you for answering the questions. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we'll collate and publish FAQs on our page to so you can go back and refer to them, and anything we didn't get to, we will ask Ofsted to supply some answers that we can share. Before we go, I just want to highlight some resources, not necessarily just about inspections, just as a general point. Coram PACEY members have access to a practice advice line in the evenings, 6:30 till 9 o'clock, advisors on the end of the phone or email, to discuss all things practice related, including inspection. If you've got questions about ratios, if you've got questions about how to complain or having the confidence to complain, give our advisors a call and they can help you through those processes. So back to inspections. The resource page is our go-to point to where we will put all information that we will be sharing. That includes the webinar recording and the FAQs. I'm just putting that link again in the chat for you. That's our page. We also have 3 brand new member exclusive bite-sized courses for you, focusing on the evaluation areas, grading and jargon busting. So members can find them in the business end of the learning theme in My Pacey, link in the chat. And we have some explainer videos. You have to suffer my voice listening to those. I do apologise. But there are some explainer videos on our inspection playlist. I'm sure there will be Ofsted's soon as well, but those are our ones. And as a reminder, here is the link to all the Ofsted official toolkit, operating guide and information resources you'll need. As you leave the webinar this evening, you'll be asked to complete an exit survey. Please just do take a few minutes to share your feedback. That's really important to us. You will receive an email from Zoom, so that won't come from Coram PACEY, it will come from Zoom, and that will contain the link where you can get to the recording and watch back and recap anything you might have missed. So do look out for that from Zoom. And I'm being a bit sneaky here. While I have an audience of childminders, Coram PACEY is today asking childminders in England to take a survey to share insights and feedback on childminding funding rates, another big topic that we have no time to go into tonight, and how possible new approach might work better. If you haven't taken that survey already, and you can, please take the survey and share it amongst your networks. I put that link in the chat as well. Okay, so that's all from me. Thank you again, Wendy and Sam, and everyone who came tonight, and all the chat comments. I will be going through them, making sure nothing is missed. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time, Wendy and Sam, and good night, everybody, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.